Carl Jung discovered something that still makes psychologists uncomfortable today. People who see everything others miss are not broken. They are psychologically advanced, and that is precisely why society rejects them. This rare ability either destroys you or transforms you into something extraordinary. In his clinical practice, Jung documented patients with what he called differentiated perception. Individuals who could read micro-expressions, sense hidden emotions, and perceive psychological patterns that escaped everyone else. They saw through social masks, detected lies instantly, and felt the unconscious tensions in every room. Jung called this discovery dangerous because these people consistently ended up isolated, exhausted, and unable to maintain normal relationships. Not because they were unstable, but because seeing everything came with a psychological cost no one understood. Today, I will show you what Jung discovered about people who see too much, why their journey terrifies even trained psychologists, and how this rare perception becomes either your greatest curse or your most powerful weapon. Jung's breakthrough came from a patient he treated in 1913 during his own psychological crisis following his break with Freud. This patient represented what Jung would later categorize as the rarest personality type. She possessed undifferentiated intuitive perception. She could walk into any room and immediately sense the psychological atmosphere. Who was lying, who was in emotional pain, who harbored secret resentments. Jung wrote that the patient displays an extraordinary capacity for perceiving unconscious contents in others. But this faculty appears to cause her considerable distress rather than advantage. She could not engage in small talk because she saw through every social facade. She could not maintain friendships because people felt exposed and uncomfortable around her. She could not hold employment because her presence disrupted the collective unconscious agreements that keep groups functioning. Jung realized he was not treating pathology. He was observing what happens when the unconscious becomes too conscious, when perception becomes too differentiated for social survival. He documented her describing people with startling accuracy. She speaks of others as if she has access to their private thoughts and hidden motivations. When I verify her observations through careful questioning, they prove remarkably accurate. This was not psychosis or delusion. This was consciousness so advanced it had become socially dangerous. But Jung discovered something even more disturbing. Because this patient's extraordinary perception seemed impossible to explain, Jung began investigating what he would later term participation mystique. The psychological phenomenon where individuals with highly differentiated intuition become overwhelmed by unconscious contents from others. Jung wrote in his Red Book period notes that there are those among us whose psychic apparatus is so finely tuned that they absorb not merely conscious communications, but the entire unconscious atmosphere of their environment. Modern research by Dr. Elaine Aron on highly sensitive persons validates Jung's early observations. Her research shows that roughly 20% of people have heightened sensory and emotional sensitivity. But Jung identified something more specific within his psychological typology. The introverted intuitive type, comprising roughly 1% of the population who do not just feel deeply, but perceive unconscious patterns with startling clarity. Jung observed that these individuals have what he called differentiated intuitive function. Their brains process not just obvious social cues, but unconscious emotional states, repressed content, and psychological patterns that others cannot detect. They see the depression behind forced smiles. They sense the desperation beneath confident presentations. They feel the collective shadow that groups unconsciously agree to ignore. Jung wrote that the danger lies not in the perception itself, but in the psychic isolation it creates. When one sees clearly what others cannot or will not see, one becomes a mirror that society cannot bear to look into. This creates what Jung called the problem of the superior function. When your greatest strength becomes your greatest burden because it separates you from collective unconscious participation. But Jung discovered the real danger was not the perception itself, because people with highly differentiated perception see others' unconscious contents clearly. They become targets for what Jung extensively documented as shadow projection, where people unconsciously attack them for reflecting what they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. Jung wrote in Psychology of the Unconscious that nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. But he discovered this principle extended to all relationships. When someone's shadow is reflected back through another person's clear perception, the unconscious mind has two choices: integrate the shadow or attack the mirror. Jung documented this pattern repeatedly in his clinical work. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. The person who sees clearly gets blamed for creating the problems they are merely observing. His patients with differentiated intuition experience this constantly. When they would gently suggest that someone seemed troubled, that person would explode at them for being negative or creating drama. When they would express concern about obvious problems, they would be accused of being judgmental or manufacturing issues where none existed. Jung realized this was not coincidence, it was psychological defense. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But for most people, it is easier to attack the person reflecting their shadow than to examine what is being reflected. This creates what Jung called the scapegoat phenomenon. Highly perceptive individuals often become the designated problem in every group they enter, not because they cause problems, but because they reveal problems that already exist in the collective unconscious. Jung observed that the bearer of superior perception becomes the repository for all that the group cannot consciously acknowledge about itself. This pattern explains why these individuals do not just feel misunderstood, they feel systematically targeted by a force they cannot rationally explain. But Jung's most disturbing discovery was still to come. Jung spent decades studying what he called the empath's shadow, integration. He observed patients, especially empaths, who seemed gentle and broken until something inside them snapped. He called these individuals the awakened ones. What happened to them did not just change their lives, it revolutionized how we understand human psychology. His case files from his Zurich clinic reveal a disturbing pattern. Patient after patient arrived carrying the same wounds, empaths who had been systematically destroyed by those who claimed to love them. They came with bruises they explained away, depression they blamed on themselves, and a universal tendency to apologize for existing. Jung documented what he saw across dozens of these cases. These individuals had spent their lives absorbing everyone else's pain. Alcoholic parents' rage, spouses' infidelity, family members' dysfunction. They were what Jung termed the emotional shock absorbers of their social systems. Here is the part that made Jung's blood run cold. These empaths did not just endure abuse, they systematized it. When Jung asked them to describe their relationships, he expected the scattered thoughts of damaged minds. What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about empaths. These patients had not been broken by abuse, they had been studying it. Jung found that empaths kept detailed mental records of every person who had ever hurt them. They knew their abusers' triggers, insecurities, and deepest fears. They had mapped emotional patterns with surgical precision. They had never used this knowledge, not once, until something pushed them past their breaking point. Jung wrote that the empath's mind is not a victim's diary. It is a strategist's war room, waiting for the moment of activation. Society had taught these empaths that this gift was a curse. Every time they tried to voice what they saw, the lies, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, people called them too sensitive or overly emotional. She learned to silence herself, to doubt her perceptions, to apologize for seeing what others could not. The truth does not disappear just because you stop speaking it. It accumulates. And in the empath's case, it had been accumulating for years. Jung wrote that the empath does not lose their mind from feeling too much. They lose their mind from being told their feelings are wrong. He realized these patients were not having nervous breakdowns. They were having breakthroughs. Jung identified a consistent pattern across his empath cases. Their transformation did not happen gradually. It happened in one explosive moment he called shadow integration under extreme duress. The trigger was always betrayal. Not just any betrayal, but betrayal by someone the empath had completely trusted and protected. In case after case, Jung documented the same scenario. The empath would discover infidelity, financial betrayal, or emotional manipulation from their closest person. What made it devastating was not the act itself. It was the realization that they had seen the signs all along and ignored them. These patients did what empaths do. They said nothing. They absorbed the pain in silence. They blamed themselves. They tried harder to be perfect partners, children, or friends. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jung called it the clarity event, when the empath's pattern recognition finally overwhelmed their need to believe the best in people. Most people would expect empaths to cry, to scream, to fall apart. Their abusers expected that too. They were prepared for emotional chaos. What happened instead was something that terrified everyone involved. The empaths became unnaturally calm. Jung described it as the moment the victim realizes they have been playing chess while everyone else thought it was checkers. Jung documented what happened next across multiple cases as the most chilling psychological transformation I have ever witnessed. These empaths did not attack. They did not rage. They simply began to speak truth. They revealed everything they had observed, catalogued, and silently endured. Not with cruelty, with clinical precision, like surgeons identifying each diseased organ before removing it. This was not revenge. It was clarity. These empaths were finally using their gift of complete perception, not to excuse behavior, but to expose it. Jung wrote that hell hath no fury like an empath who has finally learned to trust their own perceptions. Jung realized this pattern across his cases was not revenge. This was what he termed shadow integration, the moment when someone stops denying the parts of themselves they were taught to hide. The empath's shadow was not evil. It was their suppressed intelligence, their silenced intuition, their denied strength. When they finally integrated these aspects of themselves, they became what Jung called psychologically complete. Here is what made these cases so disturbing for Jung. The transformation was permanent. These patients did not cycle back into people-pleasing. They did not apologize for their newfound boundaries. They did not second-guess their perceptions anymore. They had become what Jung feared most: empaths who could no longer be manipulated. The changes did not stop at the psychological level. Jung documented how these individuals' entire lives transformed within months. They left abusive relationships with strategic precision. They cut contact with toxic family members without emotional drama. They rebuilt their lives on their own terms. Jung observed them becoming what he called selectively empathetic, still deeply caring, but strategically protective of where that care flowed. The most disturbing part for Jung was how these transformed empaths' presence affected others. People who had once walked all over them suddenly felt nervous around them. They could not explain why. These empaths were not aggressive or cruel, but everyone sensed something had fundamentally changed. Jung identified what he called the predator's instinct. Manipulative people can sense when their usual tactics will not work. They avoid integrated empaths like vampires avoid sunlight. Jung realized something that made his blood run cold. These empaths had not become less empathetic. They had become perfectly empathetic, which meant they were also perfectly strategic. They could manipulate others as easily as they had once been manipulated. They understood human psychology at a level that made them nearly omnipotent in social situations. Here is what truly terrified Jung. These transformed empaths chose not to use this power destructively. They could have destroyed every person who had ever hurt them. Instead, they simply removed toxic people from their lives and moved on. Jung realized he had witnessed the birth of what he called the integrated empath, someone with both the sensitivity to feel everything and the wisdom to choose what deserved their energy. Jung's private notes reveal his amazement. "I have observed something beautiful and terrible. These individuals have become what every manipulator fears most. Someone who can see through them completely, but no longer needs anything from them. These empath transformations did not happen in isolation." Jung documented how their changes affected every system they had been part of. Family dynamics collapsed, not because these individuals destroyed them, but because they stopped enabling dysfunction. Alcoholic family members were forced to face their addictions without empaths as emotional dumping grounds. Depressed relatives had to find other sources of validation. Manipulative siblings could no longer use these transformed empaths as psychological punching bags. Here is what made Jung realize how powerful awakened empaths truly are. Their transformation forced everyone around them to evolve or reveal their true nature. The healthy people in their lives grew stronger from their example. The toxic people exposed themselves through desperate attempts to pull these empaths back into old patterns. Jung observed something he called the empath's mirror effect. These transformed individuals did not have to actively confront people's dysfunction anymore. Their mere presence reflected issues back with uncomfortable clarity. Manipulators could not stand to be around them. They felt exposed, seen through, unable to operate their usual psychological games. Meanwhile, authentic people felt safe with these empaths for the first time. Jung wrote that the awakened empath becomes a living lie detector, not through judgment, but through presence. But the most dangerous psychological state Jung identified is shadow projection with absolute conviction. This is the primary sign. Shift to the most dangerous sign Jung identified: shadow projection with absolute conviction. The most terrifying part is what modern neuroscience has revealed about this process. When someone projects their shadow with conviction, their brain literally rewrites reality to support their distorted perceptions. Dr. Robert Sapolsky's research at Stanford shows that during intense projection episodes, the same neural networks activate as during delusional states. The person is not consciously lying. Their brain has actually altered their perception of reality. This explains why shadow projectors are so convincing to others. They genuinely believe their distorted perceptions because their neural filtering system has been hijacked by unconscious content. But here is where it gets truly dangerous. The projector's conviction creates what psychologists call reality distortion fields. They do not just see you incorrectly. They convince others to see you through their distorted lens. Jung documented case after case where shadow projectors destroyed reputations, relationships, and entire social networks simply by spreading their unconscious projections with absolute certainty. Jung identified 5 unmistakable warning signs that reveal dangerous shadow projection. Sign 1 is absolute certainty about others' motivations. They do not say, "I think you might be." They say you are with complete conviction about your internal states, motivations, and character. Sign 2 is immunity to contradictory evidence. No amount of explanation, clarification, or contrary evidence can shake their perceptions. They interpret your attempts to correct their misperceptions as further proof of their accuracy. Sign 3 is emotional intensity disproportionate to evidence. They have strong emotional reactions to perceived slights or behaviors that others find minor or non-existent. Their emotional intensity reveals the projected content, not your actual behavior. Sign 4 is consistent victim narratives. They consistently end up in conflicts where they are the innocent victim of others' malice, manipulation, or cruelty. The cast of characters changes, but they are always the wronged party. Sign 5 is recruitment behavior. They subtly or overtly try to get others to see you the way they do, often through seemingly concerned conversations about your character or behavior. When you see these 5 signs together, you're not dealing with simple misunderstanding or personality conflict. You are facing unconscious shadow projection that will escalate until it destroys something: your reputation, your relationships, or your sanity. Jung discovered an even more dangerous psychological state: ego inflation. While shadow projectors are unconsciously dangerous, inflated individuals are consciously convinced of their own righteousness while being completely blind to their shadow. The inflated person does not just project their shadow, they identify with archetypal energies that far exceed their personal capacity for integration. They become possessed by the savior, the wise one, the truth-bearer, or the righteous judge. Unlike obvious narcissists who are easily spotted, inflated individuals often appear spiritually evolved, morally superior, or intellectually enlightened. This apparent elevation makes them infinitely more dangerous, because people willingly submit to their authority. The warning signs of dangerous inflation include never doubting their own motivations, interpreting disagreement as evil, and extraordinary charisma combined with rigid thinking. The third dangerous sign Jung identified is complete identification with the social persona, the mask we wear in public becoming the only identity the person recognizes. This creates what Jung called the perfect person problem. Someone so adapted to social expectations that they have lost all connection to their authentic self and shadow. The danger is not obvious, because persona-identified individuals are often models of social appropriateness. They always know what to say, how to act, what expressions to wear. But this perfection conceals a terrifying emptiness. When someone has invested all their psychic energy in maintaining a flawless external image, their rejected shadow aspects do not disappear. They accumulate in the unconscious, like psychological pressure in a sealed container. Jung documented how persona-identified individuals often experience sudden shadow eruptions, explosive episodes where all their repressed content emerges in destructive ways. The more perfect the persona, the more chaotic and dangerous the eventual shadow explosion. This is the climax. Unintegrated superior perception leads to psychological annihilation, identity dissolution. Because unintegrated superior perception posed such dangers, Jung developed what he called the individuation process, a systematic approach to maintaining individual identity while developing conscious relationship with unconscious contents. The perceptive person must choose between being destroyed by what they see or being transformed by it. Jung's path for transforming dangerous perception into wisdom involves 3 essential phases. Phase 1 is recognition and differentiation. Jung taught his highly perceptive patients to first recognize when they were absorbing psychological material that was not there own. He called this conscious discrimination, the ability to distinguish between authentic inner experience and unconsciously absorbed external content. Jung wrote that the first task is to establish what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Without this discrimination, there can be no individual development. Phase 2 is shadow integration. Jung discovered that people who see others' shadows clearly often do so because they have not integrated their own. The more you deny your own capacity for deception, selfishness, or cruelty, the more disturbed you will be by seeing these qualities in others. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if we have the courage to look inward rather than remaining focused outward. Shadow integration means acknowledging that you contain every human quality you observe in others. This does not make you a bad person. It makes you a complete person who can see clearly without judgment. Phase 3 is conscious participation. The final phase involves what Jung called conscious participation in the collective unconscious, the ability to engage with others' psychological contents without being overwhelmed or losing your individual identity. This requires developing what Jung called psychological containers, the ability to hold others' unconscious contents temporarily while maintaining awareness that they are not your own. Jung wrote that the individuated person can serve as a bridge between conscious and unconscious, helping to make the unconscious conscious in others without sacrificing their own psychological integrity. The journey is not from sensitivity to numbness, but from unconscious absorption to conscious choice. The integrated person becomes what Jung called a balanced warrior, someone capable of incredible gentleness with those who earned it and implacable strength against those who threatened it. They became templates for what Jung believed was humanity's next evolutionary step. People who could feel everything without being destroyed by it, see everything without becoming cynical, and love deeply without losing themselves. Jung believed that individuals who successfully integrate superior perception become what he called consciousness pioneers, people who help consciousness evolve. They see what collective consciousness is not yet ready to acknowledge, helping to prepare humanity for necessary developmental steps. Jung wrote that what is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. Highly perceptive individuals who learn integration help make unconscious contents conscious before they manifest destructively in collective behavior. Remember Jung's patient from 1913, the introverted intuitive who came to him during his own psychological crisis. After 3 years of working with Jung's individuation process, her life transformed completely. She learned to distinguish between her own psychological contents and what she absorbed from others. She found work as a counselor where her differentiated perception helped troubled individuals. She built relationships with people who valued her insights rather than fearing them. Most importantly, she stopped experiencing her superior perception as a curse and began understanding it as what Jung called a gift requiring conscious development. Jung wrote about her transformation. The patient learned not to see less, but to see more wisely, not to perceive less deeply, but to engage more consciously with what she perceived. Her gift remained intact, but her relationship to it became integrated rather than overwhelming. This represents Jung's most dangerous discovery, that some individuals are born with consciousness that exceeds collective readiness, and this advanced perception will either destroy them through isolation and overwhelm, or transform them into exactly what humanity needs for its psychological evolution. Your superior perception is not a malfunction in your psychological makeup. It is an advanced feature of consciousness development. You are not broken because you see everything others miss. You are psychologically ahead of your time. The question is not whether you should suppress your perception to fit in with collective unconsciousness. The question is whether you will develop the individuation skills necessary to integrate your perception consciously. Jung's individuation method offers a path from dangerous isolation to conscious service, from overwhelming perception to integrated wisdom, from psychological curse to evolutionary contribution. You were born to see everything, not to suffer in silence, but to serve consciousness evolution. The world needs your insights, but it needs them delivered with the integration, wisdom, and strategic awareness that transform dangerous perception into cultural medicine. Your gift is not your burden. Your unconscious relationship to your gift is your burden. Learn to integrate it consciously, and you become exactly what Jung believed highly perceptive individuals were meant to be. Consciousness pioneers, preparing humanity for psychological development that is inevitable but not yet obvious. Jung's most dangerous discovery was not that some people see everything. It is that most people who see everything never learn to use what they see wisely. The danger is not in the perception itself, but in failing to develop conscious relationship with extraordinary abilities. You are not too much for this world. You are exactly what consciousness evolution requires, once you learn to wield your perception as consciously as Jung learned to wield his. The danger of seeing everything is not that you see too much. It is that you might never learn to see with the integration and wisdom your gifts demand. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description of the highly perceptive individual, you are part of a rare psychological type that Jung believed essential for consciousness evolution. Share in the comments which aspect of this journey resonates most with you. Your individuation journey connects with others walking the same path. Subscribe for more insights into Jung's discoveries about psychological development that transcends collective unconscious limitations. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.